I want you to think about a necktie for a second. It's a piece of silk wrapped around your neck, dangling uselessly over your chest. It doesn't keep you warm. It restricts your breathing if too tight. It can dip into your soup if you're not careful. Originally, the tie was the cravat, used by mercenaries in the 17th century, used to hold the tops of their jackets together. It had a job, it had utility, but today it's purely symbolic. It's a ghost of a function that no longer exists. Our world is full of things like this. Dogs help protect the perimeter against attackers, cats protected food stores against rodents. Laws, habitats, tools, and social norms, they hang around long after they've stopped making sense. But how do you distinguish between what is useful and what is adaptable and what is just dead weight? I want to introduce a concept, a mental framework called functional dynamism. And this is like a tool used to evaluate ideas, systems, and entities based on how they work, not just how they look. It relies on three core principles. First, we ask, what is this for? Um, I call it its utility function. Like take a knife. It has an explicit utility. It's obvious it can cut things. If it can't, it's failed to meet the standard of its utility function. It's simple. But there's also implicit utility. This is a secondary emergent role. Like maybe the knife is used as a status symbol or a ritual object or a tool for self defense. The first step of functional dynamism is brutally simple. Does this thing actually serve a purpose? If the explicit function fails, does the implicit function justify keeping it around? Next, we look at adaptability. This measures how well something functions across different environments. Think about a desktop computer versus a smartphone. A desktop computer is brutally more powerful in performance, but has low adaptability. It can only work on your desk. A smartphone, for example, works on the train, the bed, the bathroom, on a mountaintop. So the question here is, what remains true about a thing in different contexts? If a social norm works in a small village, but part fails in part in a big city, it lacks adaptability. And also look at the QWERTY keyboard. It was designed to prevent typewriter jams, but we don't use them anymore. But we still use the layout. The function decayed, but the form remained. This is a tool for seeking truth. You cannot find truth without understanding the nature of a thing. To understand the nature of a thing, one must investigate its totality, which is why we still, I think, obsess about the beginning of time and life and reality and its purpose. Next, I want to look at masculinity under the lens of functional dynamism. So, masculinity is a functional archetype. Its original purpose emerged in evolution, and because we didn't have children and women did, we had to become the hunter, and they stayed and reared and gathered and such stuff like that. Um, these male human roles were optimized for dangerous, competitive, and resource limited environments. So the explicit function of masculinity is strength, mastery, courage, and honor, as Jack Donovan notes in The Way of Men. These are deliberate signals for competence, reliability. Implicit masculinity also functions as an identity anchor for male self-concept. When survival pressures are low, like in modern times, cultures still use competition like sports, football, careers as proxies for traditional male roles. Um, Now let's look at adaptability, the adaptability of masculinity. When the signals change to fit in new environments without losing its underlying function, hunting societies, physical prowess, and courage were primarily adapted into uh, male intellectual competitiveness, financial success, innovation, or leadership. The question comes when attempt, when men don't have the conditions to attempt any of these things. Like, take the London Fire Brigade volunteers in the 1940s. When London was being bombed nightly by Germans, entire neighborhoods were burned, civilians were exhausted and traumatized, and many men too old or too young or unfit for the regular army were drifting into depression and shame and helplessness. But then something changed when Britain formed the Auxiliary Fire Service, and this was a civilian firefighter brigade for anybody that was left. So thousands of ordinary men, clerks, unemployed laborers, failed businessmen, widowers, men left with nothing, volunteered. So when a building burned, someone had to grab a hose, someone had to grab a ladder, somebody had to stay and put the fire out. There was no time for thinking. They had to do it because there was nobody else left. There's no time for existential paralysis. Action forced meaning into them. One volunteer later said that I didn't feel brave, I felt needed, and that was enough. The adaptable essence of masculinity demonstrated capacity to protect, provide, and prevail under challenging circumstances, regardless whether the battlefield is physical, social, or intellectual. Next, we're going to look at the functional evolution of masculinity, like we kind of touched on real quick. So we used to be hunters. We had a hunter protector phase, which is direct physical action to secure survival. Uh, then we had the builder provider phase, which is economic and societal development, um, which is like skill, trade, and strategic power based. And now we're in our abstract dominance phase, which is like the digital modern age. Dominance is more about influence, friends, ideas, and networks. So functional dynamism is about the ongoing interplay of utility, adaptability, and context. It's about realizing that just because something exists doesn't mean it works or should stick around.